Kia ora everyone, my name's Zach. I love rugby. Welcome back to Hakatime Rugby. The greatest rivalry in all of rugby is set to take another game, which is really an entree before the main event of the Rugby World Cup. And there's some huge talking points now. The team lists are in, and wow, looking at both squads, it's clear that they have both gone for strong options here for this game. A lot will say that this is a friendly or a warm-up, but it looks like these teams are continuing to try and build on both the development that has had happened so far, as well as get some confidence building before the overall World Cup. So super interesting talking points, which I'm going to cover off for you guys right now. Let's look at the front rows firstly. Ethan de Groot, Dane Coles, Tyrell Lomax up against Stephen Kitsoff, Malcolm Marx, Frans Malherbe. Probably the biggest talking point here is the starting inclusion of Malcolm Marx. I've always been an advocate for starting Marx. I just think he's a fantastic player, probably the number one hooker in the world for me. He gives you not only great work at set piece, physicality around the park, but also great work at the breakdown. You know, he's operating now like another loose forward from that perspective, able to win the ball, a constant threat in and around the breakdown. And looking at this squad from the Springboks perspective, there is a lot of breakdown threats here. I think that's one area that the Springboks will like their chances, the ability to win potentially the breakdown, and obviously having a number of jackling options in that squad with the inclusion of Malcolm Marx. So fantastic there. Dane Coles gets the start for the All Blacks. Cody Taylor obviously not included here. Potentially that could be a load management approach, but between Dane Coles, Summerson Toke Alhor, and Cody Taylor, you've got three world-class hookers there for the All Blacks. So the set piece will be very interesting. We've seen Ethan de Groot and Tyrell Lomax under all sorts of pressure at Ellis Park, able to hold their own from a scrum perspective, but they're up against world-class props in Stephen Kitsoff and Frans Malherbe, and I expect this to be just an epic battle at the set piece, particularly the scrum, and we might just see these two propping units cancel each other out largely, at least from a starting perspective. So let's see how that one plays out. From the locks perspective, Scott Barrett, Sam Whitelock. So the experience of Sam Whitelock included. We know that Brodie Retallick is out injured. And then on the other side, Eben Etzebeth, Franco Mostert. So Franco Mostert's an interesting one. He has been playing in the loose sort of the last few games, few years, it feels like. But with the partnership with Eben Etzebeth, they're probably looking at a bit more mobility around the park, and he certainly provides that. So again, this as well highlights the focus really at the breakdown, as well as a focus on speed from the Springboks. So great inclusion there. It's going to be really exciting to see how he goes. From the loose forward trio, the biggest talking point here is probably the reintroduction of Kolisi after last week's fantastic return. You would never know that he did an ACL injury and that he's now back after such a lengthy layoff. He was fantastic last week. High work rate, great in defense, and really as a leader of men. So I think he's really that talismanic leader for the Springboks. Someone that, from a leadership perspective, everyone just gets behind and follows. So his inclusion is huge. It continues this trend of mobility, of great work at the breakdown, of jackling ability, and it's going to be really interesting to see how, on the other side, Luke Jacobson, who is sitting in for Shannon Frizzell, who's currently injured, is able to deal with that threat, that mobility. Luke Jacobson is a great player. Don't get me wrong, so he's certainly able to bring a physical approach from the All Blacks perspective. I don't think he can match, obviously, the physicality of a Shannon Frizzell, but he is well known for putting big hits and shoulders on from an All Blacks perspective, or a New Zealand rugby perspective, I should say. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes there. And then you've got the likes of Sam Cane and Ardie Savea. We know world-class players, Ardie Savea, particularly with ball in hand, fantastic. You've also got the experience of Dwayne Vermeulen, Peter Steph-Toy, so it's very much a balanced approach for both. I'd probably give the slight edge, given the great reintroduction of Kolisi last week, to the Springboks, but it's going to be an epic battle. I think the breakdown is going to be the area that this game is won and lost for either team. Both that, and I think probably the other major talking point is going to be around playmaking and goal kicking. But those two areas I think are going to be crucial to victory, and I probably give the slight edge in terms of the breakdown, only slightly, to the Springboks. In terms of the set piece, I think the scrums, as I mentioned, largely cancel themselves out. The line-out jumping options will be interesting. Shannon Frizzell normally provides a great line-out option for the All Blacks. Luke Jacobson comes in for that role. But, between Sam Whitelock and Scott Barrett, world-class line-out options. They'll shoulder the majority of the load from the line-out perspective. And on the other side, you've got plenty of options. Eben Eptimeth, Franco Mostert, Peter Steph Dutoy, even Sia Kolisi there in the line-out. So, that's going to be highly competitive. I'd probably give the slight edge from a line-out perspective to the Springboks. But as we go now into the backs, we've got Aaron Smith and Faf de Klerk. Aaron Smith, we know, really runs a lot of that sort of playmaking out of 9, option taking probably more like from the ruck, so he's going to be crucial. And Richie Mo'unga there and Mani Lebok there from the Springboks perspective. The combination of Faf de Klerk and Mani Lebok is an interesting one to me. Mani Lebok certainly plays more in the mold of a traditional first 5, I should say. Great extra pass, good playmaking ability, and great attacker of the ball. So, between what we usually see from Faf de Klerk, which is sort of kick first option, and then you've got more of an attacking threat and approach of Mani Lebok, as well as the rest of the back line, it's going to be interesting to see how those two fit together. I'm sure that it just feels like the Springboks are going towards an approach which favours a bit more attacking, running rugby, and therefore we might see a reduction in the number of balls that are kicked up in the air. It was quite interesting because the last time these two teams met, obviously the All Blacks had that fantastic 20-minute period, which really won them the game, but that was one largely over dominating the high ball, the aerial stakes. So whether or not the Springboks continue to go with that approach, whether or not they play more of an attacking style is going to be an interesting talking point. But certainly from a skill sets perspective, I think having Mani Lebok operate more as that attacking threat is a better option for this team in particular. Richie Mo'unga, we know, is experienced at 10 level, has all of the skills, but really what we've seen a lot more out of him is that crossfield kick, looking to exploit the wings. So between these two half units, playmaking units, I'd certainly give the edge to the All Blacks, with the experience of Aaron Smith and obviously continuity from Richie Mo'unga, but there are some serious attacking threats there with Mani Lebok's perspective, particularly if they're looking to exploit the width of the field and some of those attacking threats out wide and in the centres, which we'll get to now. So Andre Esterhuizen, Cannon Moodie selected from the Springboks, Geordie Barrett, Rieko Ioane continuing that partnership there for the All Blacks. Esterhuizen, the crash ball specialist, Cannon Moodie, winger parading as a centre, similar to Rieko Ioane. It's going to be very, very interesting how these two play. I love that selection. I think having that crash ball really to collapse the defence is a fantastic addition. And having Cannon Moodie's pace there gives you a couple of options. It gives you that 13-channel speed option, which we very much see from Rieko Ioane and his attacking approach, is that with that extra bit of pace, he can sort of sweep around and just exploit some of the gaps that sit a bit wider. And then the other thing is that line speed and defence. We know that the Springboks like to favour more of a rush defence approach, and having someone with that kind of pace to really push the line speed is a fantastic addition, works well in the overall Springboks approach. Geordie Barrett, obviously another playmaking option, but another option that we've seen used to really get the ball wide, whether it be skip passes or whether it be, that sort of kick pass to the edges. So I expect a lot more of that happening in this game. It seems to be a continuation of the style that the All Blacks are adopting now to really hit the space and really hit the edges. So fantastic battle underway there. The back three, Mark Talia, Will Jordan, Beauden Barrett, very much a settled line up there for the All Blacks. And then Makazole Mapimpi, Kurtley Arendse, and Damien Willemse. Okay, so including Damien Willemse there at 15, obviously X Factor, great attacker. But I think you lose something quite a bit, actually, with Willie Leroux sitting there on the bench. He's sort of called the assist king now because he's able to, just be that fantastic link player. And also for someone like Mani Lebok, who is relatively new to the Springbok setup, let's say, certainly not as experienced as a Andre Pollard, but having someone like a Willie Leroux to take off some of that playmaking responsibility from the younger guys is a massive benefit. But this is an opportunity for Damien Willemse to slot into the system and to play that role that Willie Leroux would typically do, and to provide additional coverage there. So he gets his opportunity. Obviously, he's got big shoes to fill there with Willie Leroux there on the bench. In terms of the attacking threat from the back three, Kurtley Arendse, we know, is a fantastic attacker. We know that the All Blacks are settled, so I do see them having the slight edge from that back three perspective, particularly the way that Will Jordan is going. But yeah, there's some great X factor there with Damien Villensa, Kurtley Aronsay for the Springboks. Now, in terms of the benches, the bomb squad, Bongi there on the bench, Oxen Chair, Trevor Inyekani, Jean Klein, the Irishman slash Springboksman, and Ajay Sneeman, who had a fantastic game last week as well, got a lot of minutes, and Marco Van Staden there as well. So the 6-2 split in place for both teams. The All Blacks, Samathona Tokeaho, Tamaiti Williams, Fletcher Newell, Tupou Vai, Josh Lord, Dalton Papali'i. Now, the All Blacks replacements is very much a focus on the younger generation. I actually think that this is their best three replacement option off the bench. I think that this is the unit that we will see feature throughout the Rugby World Cup. Tamaiti Williams probably needs to show a little bit just to cement his spot, because you do have Ofa Tuangafasi there chomping at the bit to get involved, but Tamaiti Williams with his size really has a point of difference, and if he can start to put a few performances together, should be able to lock that spot up. On the other side, you've got all the experience in the world with Bongi, Ox, and Trevor Inyekani. So I think the Springboks, in terms of the set piece, have the edge. But in terms of dynamic running rugby, you probably get a little bit more on the other side with Toke Aho and potentially Tamaiti Williams if he can have a good performance. Tupou Vai and Josh Lord's there to cover for the All Blacks. It's going to be interesting how they are used here. I probably see that more as a coverage for Sam Whitelock, and let's say to provide an additional coverage there at 6 if required there from Tupou Vai. Tupou Vai at least gives you some options, so that's going to be interesting. Dalton Papali'i, we know, can cover a couple of positions there at the back three. And then we look at Cam Roigard, the younger sort of new breed getting his opportunity, and then Anton Leonard-Brown covering a number of positions there. But we know that looking at that All Blacks back line, that they have players that can slot into many different slots, so enough coverage there on both sides. Vili LaRue as well can cover multiple positions, so too can Damien Villemse. So all teams are covered in key areas. Now, I outlined a number of the keys to victory, set piece. From the scrum perspective, I thought they'd largely cancelled them out, each other out. I think that you get a better option with the bomb squad from Springboks coming into the second half, just purely on their experience. Line out, I think, is going to be super competitive. Slight edge to the Springboks, but I think the All Blacks with their experience there, Sam Whitelock, Scott Barrett can hold their own. The breakdown is going to be super competitive. I give the edge to the Springboks. Certainly with Malcolm Marx's inclusion for longer periods, they've got some real breakdown threats there, but we have seen improved physicality from the All Blacks, so they can certainly compete there and possibly sway it in their favour as well, which is going to be interesting. In terms of playmaking, I give the edge to the All Blacks. In terms of goal kicking, I give the edge to the All Blacks. In terms of X Factor, I give the slight edge to the All Blacks in this one, but there are attacking threats across the board on the bench for the Springboks as well. So all of that considered, where do I see the major keys to victory? To me, it's going to be the breakdown, and it's also going to be playmaking. So if I was to choose a winner, I would lean towards the All Blacks. But as I mentioned, I feel like the Springboks will have the advantage at the breakdown. And I think what we're actually going to see from this game is a lot more of the second 60 minutes of that last test as opposed to the first 20 minutes. It's going to be tight. It's going to be competitive. And, we've got two teams that are now primed and ready for the Rugby World Cup and looking for confidence boosters. So I expect no quarter given, no quarter asked, and I expect this just to be a tear up right before the Rugby World Cup and the business end starts. I've covered a lot of details there, guys, but I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope you're excited for this one and other games. We're almost there at Rugby World Cup time, and I'm going to be covering a lot of the details right here in Hakatime Rugby. Leave it there now. Talk soon. Have a good one. See you guys.